Well, hello, happy Friday, and welcome to the ActualTech Media Expert Series. Today's session is focused on moving to the cloud without AWS, Azure, or Google. Now, let me start by asking you a question. How many decisions do you think that you've made already this morning? Did you decide what to wear, what to have for breakfast, maybe which route to drive to work, or which direction to walk the dog? From the minute to the life-changing, every day we make hundreds of decisions, and it is great to have so many choices in front of us. We have freedom, we have options, we have opportunity, and I want to say yay, but sometimes I feel like I just don't want to I can't make another decision for the rest of the day, which, let's be honest, is not really an option. And we know that this opportunity overload is following us to work, especially in the world of tech. From soup to nuts, tip to tail, high-level strategies to minute deployments, you can customize every aspect of your organization's IT environment, and that's awesome. And then also overwhelming, and then exciting, and then overwhelming some more. So if cloud providers are one of those big, scary decisions that you've been maybe hemming and hawing about, don't panic. We have brought some help. Today, we will chat with an amazing expert, author, speaker, and all-around fascinating human who will help us navigate the conversation around the big three hyperscaler clouds and if they're the right choice for you and your organization. So here's the really great news. You already made an awesome decision just by joining us here today. So now you get to sit back, relax, and enjoy. Pretty nice, hey? While you folks are getting settled in and enjoying a pre-webinar coffee, let me take a quick moment to introduce myself. My name is Jess Steinbach, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you on this absolutely lovely Friday and to be your moderator for this conversation. Now, before I turn things over to our expert speaker, I'm going to zip through a few housekeeping things to help you get the most out of this awesome session today. First, I want to draw your attention to the question section in your webinar console. The expert series sessions are a great chance to chat directly with an expert, so make sure that you get those questions in. And if we don't get to your question today in the live session, don't worry, the team will be following up with you after we wrap. And hey, so if you're following along with me, you're in that questions box, look just one over at that handout section there. We've got some great resources for you to explore. I'm going to chat about one of them in just a moment here. And make sure in that questions box, if you haven't already said hi, hello, introduced yourself to the other folks out there in the community, make sure to do so. We love seeing all of you connect. If any technical issues do come up today, maybe like a slide not working or audio video type things, do try a quick browser refresh. That'll usually clear out any of the smaller tech gremlins, but if they're being particularly persistent today, shoot us a message there in the questions box and the actual team media will be there to help. And not only do we have some fascinating content ahead of us, we also have an exciting prize giveaway. At the end of our webinar today, we will be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky person in the audience. Now, of course, you must be in live attendance at the webinar to qualify, and all winners must meet the ActualTech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those T's and C's are, no problem. I don't expect you to have those memorized. You can head on back over to that handouts tab that I mentioned earlier, scroll down to the bottom, and you can find the full T's and C's there. Okay, while you're in there, I would also recommend check out the Gorilla Guide Book Club if you haven't done that. I mean, the weekend's approaching. If you need some good weekend reading, go download some enterprise books and check them out. They're really fascinating. Before we move into our session, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this exciting expert series. So a big thank you to OVH Cloud for bringing us all here today. If you're looking for something a bit different, check out OVH Cloud and let's get to know them a little bit more. When you opt for a dedicated server, you know that all of its resources are allocated to you, which means you get the best performance. You can deploy servers in less than 120 seconds in OVH's 33 data centers around the world, which means you get all the benefits of a secure, high resilience network and ensure that there are no disruptions to your customers. You can enable infrastructure for scalability and rest easy knowing that you have on-demand disaster recovery and backup at a lower cost, including, as you can see on your screen, no ingress or egress fees. How great is that? And you get to stay agile and flexible with cloud-native apps that are based on open source standards, OpenStack, and Kubernetes. So that's increased performance, easy access and availability, scalability, durability, transparency, and compliance. What is not to love? If you want to learn more, use that QR code that's there on your screen. And if you need to access the slide at any point during the presentation, we've actually loaded it into the handouts tab. So you can click into that handout section, click on the OVH link, and start exploring. Okay, so we've gotten through the general housekeeping, we've met our incredible sponsor, and now I think it's about time to introduce our fascinating expert speaker for today's session. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Howard Cohen, creator of compelling content, technologist, author, and just an all-around awesome conversationalist. Howard, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the Expert Series.
Jess, I'm still not breathing from that introduction. Thank you so much. Wow.
Well, we're pretty happy to have you here, Howard. I'll hand things over to you. Dazzle.
Thank you very much. Wow. Okay. So no pressure. Welcome to today's presentation on moving to the cloud without Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. I'm Howard M. Cohen. Jess told you all about me. There's nothing more you need to know. But I would like to point out that to some small extent, there's a bit of a misnomer in the title of today's session. And that has to do with the use of the word cloud. Thinking about it, I would have should have used clouds, plural. For as far back as I can remember, I've been telling folks, this whole thing about going to the cloud. Remember the commercials? To the cloud. It's not about a cloud. There is no one's. Ignore that man behind the curtain. I am the great and powerful cloud. No, it is about clouds. Lots of clouds. In fact, thousands, maybe even millions of clouds. And each one of those clouds is a data center delivering services to you remotely. Very simple when you come down to it. But the point of having all those clouds is selection, choice. You don't have to stay with a cloud that doesn't work well for you. You can pretty easily switch to another. Much more easily than ripping out hardware and replacing it with new hardware. So that's one of the big advantages cloud brought us, was the ability to pick and choose. Okay, those of you who have attended any of my presentations in the past know that I love to start with a word. Owing to the fact that I am a writer, words are important to me. And today's word is application. Application is everything, right? We operate information infrastructure so that we can manage applications. And those applications manage our data, our information. So given that it's all about application, it's important to choose the right application. It's also important to choose the right platforms to accommodate those applications. As in this example here, these two guys are reaching the wrong place. Hopefully they'll get to the right place soon. The big question you need to ask yourself when thinking about choosing applications, going back to Jess's point about making decisions. I know for myself, I usually get stuck at the coffee cabinet trying to pick which bean I want to grind today. And I could stand there for hours. No, but seriously, when it comes to applications, which is right for you? Let me give you some examples of what I mean. Let's start, even before you get to the application, let's start with service providers, right? Many of you probably use a managed services provider, right? They take care of certain things for you, things that maybe your staff doesn't have the skills for or doesn't have capacity for during peak times. Or maybe they run your entire infrastructure for you so you don't have to maintain your own staff. There's lots of choices there. Managed service providers are very popular, and using them can help you improve upon the way you manage data. More recently, people have been gravitating toward cloud service providers. They've specialized. People who really focus in on cloud services and managing those cloud services for you. Now, hopefully, as you go forward, your company starts to grow. You may find that you have need for a national service provider. You now have locations all over the country. You need help managing each of those locations and the connections to all the others. So you turn to a national service provider. And because you just keep on rolling in success, you've grown so much, you may require the services of a global service provider. So you're picking your provider based on specialty and upon scope, size. Those are usually the levers that we push and pull to get to the choices that we make. Now, there are other decisions that you need to make. For example, when we talk about clouds, or when we talk about network infrastructure, when we talk about information technology, you may be still running everything on premises. You may have your own network closet. You may have your own data center, and everything is there. If you do, you are, these days, probably in the minority. There are very few people who are just using on-premise infrastructure to manage their data, but it is definitely a choice. There's nothing wrong with it. You may be completely on premises. You may find that it's more cost-effective and more productive to use some public cloud services. These are services that are available to anybody, and you simply subscribe to them. You subscribe each user individually to the level of service that you need them to have. A good obvious example, things like Office 365 or today Microsoft 365, productivity suite, word processing, spreadsheets, presentations, all this wonderful stuff that everybody uses day in and day out. You don't really need to run that on your servers. You don't need to be worried about upgrading that, updating that, patching it. That's painful. It's probably a lot more cost effective to just subscribe to it and get it from somewhere else. Of course, Productivity Suite is just one of many, many kinds of applications that you can get from public cloud. You can get data backup from public cloud. You can get CRM from public cloud. You can get ERP from public cloud. All the different applications that you use, most of them are available from a public cloud or many different public clouds. And that's great. You get to choose and pick and choose which ones you'd like to use better. Then there's private cloud. Now, private cloud is widely misunderstood. Private means that it's just for you. Nobody else gets into it except you, your company, your users. It is sequestered just for you. That does not mean that it's remote. That's not a requirement of public cloud. It may be on your own premises. In 2012, Satya Nadella was responsible for systems and tools at Microsoft. It was before he became CEO. And he introduced Windows Server 2012, the operating system, as the Cloud OS, because you could run it in your own premises and be compliant with the definition of private cloud computing as provided by the National Institute for Standards in Technology, NIST. Wonderful 4-page document, quick reading. If you haven't read NIST's definition of cloud computing, I strongly recommend you go Google it and grab it and read it. In there, you'll find a definition of private cloud that talks about having a self-service portal where users can request the services they need, use them, and then release them. And the biggest problem most of us have is that those users tend to forget to release them. That's bad because you're only paying for the services you use when you're using them. If you release them, you stop paying for them. So those are all characteristics. And there are many other characteristics that many OSs today do comply with. and you can run your own private cloud, or you can run it in a cloud system. You can run it at a co-location facility. There's a lot of choices there. The private cloud is a very manageable, very high production environment to find yourself in. Then, of course, there's the ever popular word, hybrid. From my perspective, and if you've read me, you know that I say this all the time, everything is hybrid. There are very few things that are not hybrid. The moment that an on-premises system subscribed to Office 365, as an example, it became a hybrid. You yourself probably have applications running on your personal computer, and you probably shop on Amazon or Overstock.com or Buy.com. That's public cloud. So you are hybrid. You are a user of on-premise software and public cloud software. Everything is hybrid. And therefore, we can expect that to continue for some time to come. It should not be a limiter. It's not like you have to be all public cloud or all private cloud. Just about nobody is. When you use multiple public cloud services, as an example, if you're using Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, which is absolutely viable, you're now in the world of multi-cloud, which we're not going to get into today because we could spend hours on it. But know that it is extremely viable to pick and choose the services you want from each and use them together in your own environment. A few other considerations. Security. A lot of misunderstandings about security. Yes, every cloud provider, whether hyperscaler, the big three, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, other hyperscalers, alternative clouds, smaller clouds, they all provide some level of security. But if you look in their contract, you will find that they assure you that they will take no responsibility for the sanctity of your data. They can't. No security is perfect. They protect themselves that way. But the question I always ask people is, if your data is corrupted or stolen, even if it's in the cloud, who's going to lose their job? Who's going to get fired? And it's not a good answer. But the reality is that you need to take fiduciary responsibility for the data. And my recommendation, simple. Encrypt at all times. Wherever you're storing your data, store it encrypted. Do not share the key. Your internet service provider, your cloud service provider, they don't need your encryption key. They never have need to get at the payload that you're storing or transporting. So be sure that your data is encrypted when it's at rest in storage, as well as when it's being transported from place to place. It's a great last line of defense, and more often than not, it will protect you. Hint, hint, the government can access your data in the cloud without your knowing it. But if you've encrypted it and you have the key, ultimately, they do have to come to you and let you know that they've appropriated your data, because they can't use it without the key, and they have to subpoena the key from you. It's a good line of defense to have. Services, another consideration in the cloud. The fact of the matter is that each of the hyperscalers have hundreds of services to offer you. Services as simple as data backup, some security services, certainly, as sophisticated as artificial intelligence and machine learning, tools to help you develop, services to help you develop those applications, services for building games, if that's what you're into. There's all kinds of services. Here's the challenge. Number one, you may find the same service, very well likely you'll find the same service listed at Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, and those services have nothing to do with each other. They don't even resemble each other. Just because they use the same title doesn't mean that they define that service the same way. Some may be shades of meaning difference, some may be substantially different. So you really have to dive deeper. You can't just take it at name value. You've got to dive deeper into the descriptions of the services and analyze them from that perspective to make sure you understand exactly what you're getting. Similarly, they may name the same service in different ways. So again, it takes homework. You really need to look deeper down into what the services are and which ones you want to use. Also, the pricing of the services can vary pretty widely. So you really need to analyze that as well. Next up, support. Not just the idea that they do or don't have support. It is altogether likely that any respectable cloud service provider has some support capability. And it may be great, maybe not so great. What's important to you is not just that they have it, but that it's responsive, that you don't have to wait potentially hours or days. In many cases, your operations may not be able to withstand that wait. You may have a problem that needs to be solved right now. Otherwise, dozens or hundreds or thousands of people can be sitting there twiddling their thumbs. Not something that you want. You need to have a support functionality you know you can depend upon. And you only learn that by talking to your providers and by talking to other customers who use those providers. What has their experience been? And so support, really well-delivered support is of critical importance. And then another consideration are tools and APIs. Many of you will be developing applications yourself and using the cloud to do it. It's a great place to do it. Your developers can spin up a server pretty quickly, instantly, really, and they can start working there. They can spin up test servers, user acceptance testing servers. There's all kinds of things that they can do that are very flexible. And each of the providers offers tools to help them develop their applications. And so you do need to look at what tools are available to help me operate in this cloud, but also to help me develop in this cloud. These days, when you look at a new piece of software, most people I talk to, one of the first things they look at is the integrations page. What other software does this software integrate well with? And that's not surprising. We're living in a time where interoperability is perhaps the most important feature of anything we use that regards compute. Interoperability. Will it work with others? Will it play nicely in the sandbox? Crucial. We want to be able to connect our CRM to our ERP and perhaps connect both of those to marketing automation and so forth and so on. If we can't do that directly, there should be a quality applications programming interface available to help us do that, an API. Credible cloud providers provide excellent APIs. Makes it easy for your people to connect different applications together to share data. This frees up people from having to do that. And quite frankly, that is as scuddy as scut work gets. The idea of doing, a chair spin data copy. You take it from one system, turn and enter it into another system manually. Nobody wants that job. And you don't want people doing it because people are more error prone than systems are. And so having the right APIs, having the right tools to make it easy for you to get everything working together, that's all a very good thing. Okay, so we've looked at some of the considerations that you need to think about when you're selecting your clouds. We've looked at the different kinds of clouds that that we have to choose from. The next thing we need to look at is scale. Scale. How big are you? How big are you today? How big will you be tomorrow? How big will you be 5 years down the road? These are important considerations when you're talking about the kind of investments that it takes to use cloud computing. You don't want to have to throw out everything you've invested in today because you grew so much that you need something completely new for tomorrow. You want your environment to be able to scale with you. And that's one of the driving reasons, I think, why a lot of people like to use the big three hyperscalers. They're huge. They seem infinite. Practically, they are. They can always add more capacity if they ever hit the top. But let's look at the big three hyperscalers, right? We're talking about Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Each of them has hundreds of data centers located all over the world. Think about having hundreds of data centers, huge investments, tons of services, tons of processing capacity, tons of storage capacity, tons of memory. I mean, there's just so much infrastructure out there waiting and ready for you to use. The good news is, as small as you are, so you use a small amount of it. As you grow, it's all there. You can grow into it as quickly or as slowly as you like to, and smoothly. And so one of the reasons that I think a lot of people gravitate to the big three hyperscalers is that they do have the ability to scale on a hyper level. That's why they call them hyperscalers. Okay. There are others. There are other hyperscalers in addition to the big three. There's Oracle, very popular provider of applications and databases, and IBM, very popular provider of literally everything compute. And they have cloud offerings that are huge, absolutely huge. And many, many customers, especially those who are using their software, are probably also using their cloud. It seems to make sense. And of course, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. That's really as true about IBM as it is about all these others these days. Anyway, question. How much of the market do you think these guys own? Answer. When it comes to Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, Amazon's got about a third of the cloud market, close to a third of the cloud market. It's a little known fact. Most people think that Amazon was an e-commerce giant who started up some web services and grew that. The reality is today that Amazon is a web services company that happens to have an e-commerce division. The web services deliver the lion's share of Amazon's profits. That's how big web services is in their world. So, that's some perspective on Amazon. Microsoft just recently changed their entire partner program to focus on Azure. Azure. They are shifting in the direction of being primarily a provider of public and private cloud services using their Azure infrastructure. Google also has turned a lot of resources toward that. In terms of the other hyperscalers, they own about 10% of the market. So we've accounted for about 80 some odd percent of the marketplace. And of course, there are other hyperscalers out there who also have in the single digits of market share. In the middle are all the alternative cloud providers. And right now, they own a respectable 15.23% of the entire market. That's a substantial proportion. It's almost as much as Google. These are smaller companies with less familiar names that have chosen to become providers of cloud services. Just about all provide your generic virtual machines with processing and memory and storage. Many of them are specializing, some in application development, some in specific applications. I think you're going to see more and more diversification, specific operating system support. I think that you're going to see that, but there are some that are really distinguishing themselves today as being, really quality choices, someone you can depend upon and somebody you can get close to. We'll talk about that shortly. Question is, why are so many people moving? This is really happening now. That 15.23, that's up, and it's heading up. It's trending up. Why? Mainly because the hyperscalers have to some extent become hyperscalers. People have become quite concerned about things they see happening in these big, large environments where there's less of a personal connection. They've seen outages, and we've all heard about them in the news. And every time there's an outage, a lot of customers are affected because there are a lot of customers on each of the hyperscalers infrastructures. There have been security lapses. They tell you in their contract, no security is perfect. And indeed, that has proven itself time after time after time. Some have been concerned that there are limited options. They feel like they're locked in, if you will, to one cloud provider. I'm here to tell you that that's not really true. I don't see the hyperscalers as locking you in. I come from a time where application developers wrote their code in such a way that you couldn't turn to anybody else for modifications or support. You were kind of locked into them. But these days, with these very large companies, they have no reason to lock you in. They don't need to involve that ugly strategy. They're quite happy to provide a much more open environment where you can pick and choose whose services you want to use. While some are concerned about high costs, the bigger concern is the complexity of the pricing programs. Remember that guys like Microsoft and Google cut their teeth on software licensing, which you need an advanced degree to be able to perform software licensing. It's very complex, very ornate. There are tons of different product codes to choose from, each one slightly different from the one before it. Very difficult. And that has migrated over to the cloud environment as well. Not only can they be very complex, they're constantly changing. There are constantly specials, reserved instances, for example, that can provide you with great discounts. You don't know from day to day whether you're currently using the most cost-effective solution because one of the competitors may have priced under it. And again, that's why I say you need to have a financial manager on staff, part of your cloud team, always keeping on top, or at least a procurement person, always keeping on top of pricing to make sure that you're taking best advantage and minimizing your spend. Then there are the three fears that I sure hope are unfounded. I don't believe they're true. I'd like to believe they're not. I can't prove it one way or the other, but some reports have come in that some of the cloud providers are appropriating the intellectual property of their customers. Customers are putting workloads on their infrastructure and they are copying it. They are taking it. I cannot imagine a reputable cloud provider doing that. And I'm also aware that there are probably many unreputable cloud providers, something you've got to be careful about. But if it is true, it's a very sad statement. But there are reports of that concern. Fear of competition, that the cloud provider is seeing who your customers are, and they're pursuing your customers to make them their customers. Again, I really hope it's not happening. I can't imagine, at least the majors, I just can't imagine them allowing themselves to fall into that trap. But again, there may be cloud providers out there who are less savory and maybe doing something like that. And another big fear, staff poaching. They get to know your top technology people and they hire them away from you. That has been a fear as far back as I can remember, way before cloud. And again, it's not something a major corporation can afford to do, because if it gets out that they're doing it, it could significantly damage their business. And so I'd like to think that these things are not happening. What you want to find are attractive alternative cloud providers. And before you wonder, yes, those are George Clooney's eyes. I wanted to make sure that people found them to be attractive eyes. So I went to the guarantee, if you will. And in terms of attractive alternatives, some of the features are a selection of functionalities. Now, this is different in the alternative cloud space than it is in the hyperscaler space. In the hyperscaler space, it's all about having a broad selection, hundreds of different services. And you can go blind just looking at the directory of services in some of these places. For the alternative cloud providers, they may be providing core functionality plus some specialties. Think medicine. In the old days, everybody was Marcus Welby. I hope all of you know who Marcus Welby was, and I'm not the only old guy here. But he was a general practitioner on TV, played by Robert Young. And general practitioner has given way to everybody wanting to be a specialist. The same is true in computer services as well. Over time, the MSPs will graduate to become far more specialized. Some have already become cloud SPs, cloud service providers. You'll see more of that. There are internet service providers, ISPs, so forth and so on. You want to be able to configure your virtual machines with as much flexibility as possible. What speed processor, how big a processor do you need to be using for your applications? What OS? Is it Linux? Is it Windows? What? Which OS do you want to be using? What's your preferred database? Which database would you prefer to be using in your virtual machines? How much memory? What kind of storage? How much storage? It should be easy for you to pick and choose these on the self-service console that is provided for you. Alternative cloud providers vary, but it's one of the metrics that you want to gauge them on. You want variety in terms of storage. Do they have both all different kinds of storage? Do they give you blobs and lakes and so forth? Warehouses, object, block, and file storage, of course. How many choices do you have? And are any of those the choice you prefer to use? Simplicity of pricing. Actually, I think that the alternative cloud providers, by and large, have gotten this, that customers are frustrated by the complexity of hyperscaler pricing. And so they provide as much simplicity as they can in the pricing that they offer to you. Quality infrastructure. I started out by saying that a cloud is simply a data center delivering services to you remotely. Well, if it's a data center, then there's going to be hardware and software there. And you're basically saying that you prefer that hardware and software over your own hardware and software. That needs to be true. So you need to be sure that the hardware and software they're using for their infrastructure is of the same or better quality than you would choose yourself. And that is absolutely something you can talk with them about, and something they should be able to assure you about, that, yeah, indeed, they are using quality hardware and software. As we said before, provisioning should be easy and convenient, whether it's provisioning new users, removing users, managing the operations from the network to the compute engines, to the storage, and so forth. Again, as we've said before, available APIs. You should be able to easily interface your software in the cloud, across clouds. And then this last one, aligned geography. This is an interesting one that's getting more and more prevalent. As more and more cloud services deploy data centers worldwide, customers are looking to them to locate their workloads as close to their location as possible to minimize latency. Yeah, electrons travel at the speed of light, but the world's a big place. And there is a difference. If your workload is located a continent away, there is a difference that rather than if your workload is located next door. And people are taking advantage of that difference. And they're looking to be able to take advantage of that difference for a lot of applications. So the broader their diversity of locations for their data centers, in some cases, depending on your application, the better off that can be for you. When it comes to choosing an alternative, my suggestion is to ask yourself, why do you choose a local law firm to work with rather than any of the global law firms? Why do you choose a local accounting firm instead of one of the big four or big six or however many there are in the big group today? Why do you choose a local medical practice instead of the global or regional or national practices? And why do you choose to do business with a local or regional bank rather than any of the big banks? And the answer is simple. You're looking for a more intimate relationship. Now, I'll let you kind of absorb the concept of a more intimate relationship while staring into the eyes of George Clooney. But basically, what I'm saying is fewer customers means more attention. The fewer customers a provider has, the more attention they can pay to each individual customer. You want to mean more to your suppliers. And therefore, if they have fewer customers, you will mean more to them. You'll be more of a proportion of their business. And that should translate into driving need to serve you better. Bottom line is you want to be more than just another account number. You want to be a person, and therefore you want to have personal relationships between you and your people and their people. Having those personal relationships can absolutely give you a better chance of having your special requests fulfilled. There's nothing nicer than discovering that there's something that it doesn't do, and then you reach in and say, hey, can you get it to do this? And they do. They add that functionality or they modify it, whatever, to suit your needs. I'm not saying it's impossible with the hyperscalers, but I think it's much more viable with a smaller, more intimate relationship with an alternative cloud provider. The other question I think you need to ask yourself is, where does innovation thrive? Does it thrive more in the big mega companies that have big mega stakeholders and big mega fiduciary responsibilities? Or does it thrive in the skunkworks, in the small, nimble little companies that are constantly looking for a leg up and finding it in their innovation? This is one of the reasons I've had a lot of fun working with alternative cloud providers. I'm referred to in the category of a thought leadership writer. I write about thought leadership. And as a writer, I write about the thought leadership of others. I'm seeing a lot more thought leadership taking place, a lot more thought taking place in the alternative cloud provider space, and makes them much more fascinating to write for. For you, I think it makes them much more fascinating for you to bring into your compute environment to help you build it. Okay, we've talked about how to choose alternative clouds, what to look for, what to think about, what you need. I'd like to part with one last bit of wisdom, and that is, wherever you go, whichever alternative cloud provider you go to, whichever hyperscaler you go smartly. Don't try to transition everything all at once. No big dumps. You don't want to do that. You want to migrate gradually, workload by workload, carefully, well planned. You want to start by assessing your current state, where you are now. What are your applications? What are your databases? What are your workloads? Who are your user groups? What do they each need? And then once you know your current state, you need to define very clearly what your desired future state is. Where is it you're going? Armed with where you are and where you're going, you can then create a roadmap to get from one to the other. You need to know both first. As you're doing that, you're going to determine what the destination is for each of your workloads. It may be on-prem now, but is it going to public cloud, private cloud? Are you going to put it in a hyperscaler? Is this something you want to put into an alternative cloud for any one of a number of very good reasons? Do that intelligently. Don't just kind of close your eyes and stick your finger on the board. You'll be using tools to migrate. Select them deliberately. Don't just take a recommendation from a buddy. Look at the tools. Talk to people about the tools. Look for reviews of the tools. Challenge the tool providers to convince you that theirs is the right tool to use. The other thing I'd like you to consider, and this is an important consideration from a financial and operating standpoint, maybe the most important, when you migrate, it's something you're going to do once for each workload. And once you've migrated over, you're probably not going to do that again. You can certainly train your people to do it, but once they've completed the migration, that's it. They're done. They'll never use those skills again. It may pay to have an external resource come in and just do the migration for you, so you can keep your people working at what they do and get it done quickly. And if you choose somebody who does it often, you can take advantage of all their experience, the experience they've gained doing migrations for others. Just a recommendation or something to think about as you start to plan, because you may find that backfill for your existing people can be very expensive. Food for thought. Ultimately, in closing, you want to choose the type of cloud that fits you best. For some, it'll be Cumulus. For some, it'll be, these are real clouds. Sorry, wrong slide. But you know what I'm saying. There are many, many different kinds of clouds. Beyond the hyperscalers, there are all kinds of terrific alternative cloud services to avail yourself of. And go out and find them. Talk to your colleagues about them. Look for reviews and determine which ones suit you best. And with that, Jess, do we have any questions?
We do. You know, I have to say, I've always been a fan of Cumulonimbus, so I think that's my cloud of choice today, Howard.
Yep. I'm a Cirrus guy myself. I like it high.
Okay, a little wispy. I like it. Well, that was awesome. Just a fantastic presentation, as always. I think, I was thinking as we were kind of going through, it's so often when we're making these decisions, we just get frustrated with the overload, and we kind of jump in. And one of the things you called out early on is sometimes we'll just go with a name we recognize because we figure, that's been validated and brand recognition and okay, it makes our choice easy. And it may be that that's a good choice for you, but it's worth, taking a second look and exploring the alternatives and putting in that research on the front end before you jump into a decision.
Absolutely. You're making them part of your business.
And that's a fantastic point. Every time you bring in a new relationship, a new vendor, think of that as adding them into would you hire this person if they were, if Azure was a human, would you hire them to your team? All right. Well, we got a high five.
Azure may not be human, but I've heard that Google has recently become sentient. So,
Yeah, that's
That's
The
not
beginning of
true.
that's a different movie, Howard. That's a different. All right. Well, I do want to pass on this high five from Hans, who wanted to make sure you knew that that was just a fantastic presentation. I absolutely
Thank
agree. I also want to reiterate this question from Jolene. We did answer it in publicly as well, but I think it's worth making sure that everyone hears. She had asked early on about the resource that you suggested, which was NIST, and I just want to make sure that everyone got that answer, because I do think that that is worth checking out for some follow-up reading. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Yeah, and their website is nist.gov. I wish I should memorize the document number. I think it's 805 something, but no matter. Just Google cloud computing at nist.gov, and you'll find
Perfect. All right. So some
required reading for anybody who's in the
There
class.
you go. See, you didn't know when you were coming on this Friday morning that Howard was going to give you homework assignments for next week.
Always.
All right. Well, I want to start with this question from DeCalo, and it's a little bit layered. So I'll read it through. What are some of the best practices or recommendations of deploying dev, test, and production VMs on the cloud, bearing in mind the cost of having the test and dev VMs running but not being utilized 24/7, and also the hindrance of application licenses not compatible or supporting multiple activations? It's a long one.
Yeah. I don't know that I can even begin to approach that. That's a lot of question. And unfortunately, it's not a best practice. It's many that are involved. You're talking about things like, for example, keeping the cloud instances running, keeping the VM instances running.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways to skin that cat, and we could be here the rest of the day just talking about that. I think that the best answer is that there should always be resources at the cloud provider who you can approach with a question that specific and that complex, who will be able to give you chapter and verse. And I think that the biggest problem we face is that most people just don't approach support. They don't reach out. And that's what support is there for exactly for that. If you're really good at what you do, you'll be challenging to the support organization because your questions will only be the most complex ones. But they do have, all levels of support capability to dive into a question that has that many ramifications.
And that's an important point, that support there. And it dovetails nicely with another question that we got here that I'd like to ask you. Someone was wondering about the difficulty of migrating to an alternative cloud rather than one of the big three, because, what they're anticipating is a lack of tools, documentation, third-party expertise, and maybe some of that support. Do you find that support, you had brought that up as one of the pros of an alternative, but can you dig into that a little bit further for us?
Yeah, well, on one level, the tools themselves, the technologies, the protocols, the fundamental OS hooks that it takes to migrate from one place to another are relatively consistent from cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud. There's not a lot of inconsistency. There is some, idiosyncrasy there that you need to know about, but you pick that up as you go along. I think, owing to the fact that you are much more of a proportion of their business to an alternative cloud provider than you are to the hyperscalers, I would bet that the help you get migrating will be tremendous from the alternative cloud providers. There are certainly software providers, tool providers out there who offer up tools to help you migrate, and they will make sure their tools work in the environment that you're trying to work in. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the engineers who are available to you at the alternative cloud providers, who will help make sure that your migration goes smoothly and thoroughly.
Well, I think that also answers. Mohammed was sort of asking about recommendations for managing if you're dealing with an aggressive timeline on-prem to cloud. And it sounds like what you're saying is, of course, reaching out to the specific data or humans and customer relationship managers to kind of help make a plan and help them kind of build that plan with them and see how they answer that question. Might be a good place to start. Did you have anything else you'd want to add to somebody who's looking at an aggressive timeline?
I think your answer is spot on, Jess. I think that, listen, I'm not going to ever say that the support that comes out of the hyperscalers is anything less than excellent. They have terrific people. They do. I mean, I've worked with lots of them, and a lot of them are just remarkable experts. I think that often when you're dealing with an alternative cloud provider, you're dealing with one of the core engineers who built the system. And there's an intimacy they have with their system that sets them apart from other folks. And they're problem solvers by nature. And they will get much more personally involved in your workloads, in your strategy, and in your crunched timeline. I've been, I don't want to say pleasantly surprised. I've been pleased by the experiences I've had working with alternative cloud providers because they're in the trenches with you. I guess that's the only way that I can put it. And you're right. It is absolutely the human element in computing that can make the difference between getting something done that has a very short lifetime or not getting it done in time.
Yeah, that human element is still very important.
It's so much more important than people give it credit for.
Yes.
The human element is so, it comes up so many times in so many ways. And I think it's important that we all respect it and recognize it, especially when we're perplexed and realize, oh, I can reach out to a person and they'll help me.
There's nothing like that. Yeah, I love getting a human on the line when I'm really in need of an answer. Well, I think you've been the human on the line for all of us today, Howard. Lots of incredible information. I wish we could keep going. We do need to wrap it here. But before we leave, I want to ask you, if you could know that everyone is walking away from this webinar today with one thought or one question or one piece of information, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, I think the carpenter's rule applies. That is to say, measure twice, cut once. Don't go willy-nilly into any piece of software, tool, platform, doesn't matter. The first step in any software project, in any technology project, has got to be research. Look at each of the components you plan to use. We're entering into a time where everybody's looking more at best of platform than they are at best of breed tools. That is to say, it's great to have a bunch of tools in your toolbox, but if they're all from different brands, it may be hard to make them work together. Whereas if you turn to a platform that provides all the tools you need, you'll also get the added benefit of having a unified interface, consistency between the tools. That improves your ease of support, your ease of training, and it better assures that you'll be able to get help without finger pointing. Oh, well, you use that tool? You can't use that tool. It sounds funny, but it's true. I think that do the research up front. Make sure that you've wisely chosen each of your tools, each of your platforms, each of your cloud providers for all the best reasons. Vet. Keep on asking questions. Keep on making them prove themselves to you, because as I said before, you're making them part of your infrastructure, part of your business. And the last thing you want to do is introduce something less than great into your business.
That's a great point. And Mark had echoed while you were chatting about people that even the best technologies aren't as effective without the people in the process, which I think is always a good reminder.
Amen.
And right. We got some more high fives from Aaron and Scott. Also wanted to express their thanks to you, Howard. And unfortunately, as I said, I wish we could keep going, but we will have to wrap it there. Thank you so much, Howard, for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Hope we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Well, and before everyone heads out today, we do have one more extra little bit of excitement. You guessed it. It is time for a prize giveaway. I'm going to remind you again that you must be in attendance at the webinar, and we will get in touch shortly about claiming your prize. So today's winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is Jacqueline Sin of California. Jacqueline Sin of California. So congratulations to Jacqueline. We will follow up with you after the webinar. And with that, on behalf of the ActualTech Media team, I want to thank OVH Cloud for making this webinar possible, and just a giant thank you to Howard for a truly engaging discussion today. The smile on my face now is huge, and it's not just because it's Friday morning. That was just an incredible session. And hey, on that note, sending high fives and special thank yous to all of you for attending, for making the decision to participate in this conversation today. I know that many of us feel time-starved in our days, so it really does mean a lot to us that you choose to spend some time chatting, exploring, learning, and connecting with all of us in these webinars. As you know, the Expert Series session is so wonderful to be a part of, not just because it's a wonderful end of the week, but because they give us an opportunity to connect, to explore these innovative new ideas and concepts together with some solid expert guidance. I know that I have learned a ton from this discussion. I hope you all have as well. I can't wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful rest of your day.